Yesterday I was in Chilliwack, which just, if you hadn't been paying attention, is now an NDP constituency. In Chilliwack, we nominated a candidate who was the former executive director of the BC Wildlife Federation, was the former, by one day, currently the executive director of the Chilliwack Chamber of Commerce, Patty McMahon. And I think that reflects what's happening in our province, which is a good thing, which is that people are coming to an NDP that is open to the community and open to all facets of BC society. It's great to be here in this town. I wanted to thank many of the people who are representatives in town for being here. I was talking to Mary, the mayor, just a few moments ago, and she said that most of the city council is here, and I'm very appreciative of that and all the service that all members, elected people, provide in communities. It's great to have Nate Bellow here, because he's a very old friend of mine and an advisor and a thoughtful and talented person who's represented Quesnel as well. It's great to be here with NDP candidates like Charlie Wise from Cariboo South, who last time, just to show that voting's really important, lost by about 100 votes. Not next time. It's great to be here with Bobby Deepak, our candidate in Prince George Mackenzie, a new generation of candidates who's bringing, I think, real change to the Prince George community, the NDP in Prince George, and mounting a huge challenge, a significant challenge to Liberal Cabinet Minister Pat Bell. I think that this is an important time for our province. I think that's why you're here, certainly why I'm here, why I ran for the leadership of the NDP, why I work as an MLA. I think that this is a time when we need to see change in our province, but not just change. Yes, we have a Liberal government that has been in power for 11 years. Yes, they're not very popular. Yes, their primary success since the last election was bringing in and then sending away the HST, disrupting the economy on the way in and the way out. But I don't think it's enough anymore just to win because the premier's unpopular or the government's unpopular. That's not enough for us. It's not enough for me. It's not enough for you. It's certainly not enough for Duncan and Cecile. It's not enough for the NDP. We have to start, I think, by changing the way we do politics in our province. And that's what I've tried to do since I've become leader of the NDP. You might have noticed that this approach is taken by everybody. Last January, the Liberal Party ran $1 million plus of negative personal attack ads against, well, me. They've run out of ways to rhyme and do double entendres with my last name. And there's going to be more to come. But I don't believe that's the right approach. I think that at a time, and you saw this in the last election, when the majority of people eligible to vote in British Columbia did not vote in the last election. 1.7 million people did not vote. In the last municipal elections across BC in 2011, 1.9 million people didn't vote in the communities that had contested races. That was 71% of the total in the municipal election. 55% of the total in the provincial election did not vote. And that should tell people involved in politics that the constant attacks back and forth that don't deal with the substance of things is turning people off. So let's start here. Let's start here today and across British Columbia by saying this. I have disagreements with Premier Clark and with Mr. Cummins and with Ms. Sturck, the leader of the Green Party, that are as long as my arm and almost as long as Dave Zergel's arm. But they are committed people. They're in politics largely for the right reasons. Every time I run in an election in Vancouver Kingsway, there are 5 or 6 candidates, and most of them lose. Most of them lose. There's only one winner, In an election, most of the people who run lose. They don't get paid for it. There's some ego gratification, and frankly, some ego deflation, right? But they are contributing to the community. They're making our democracy better by running. It doesn't make sense for us to diminish politics and the respect for the democratic process, which is so important to our economy and our society, by running personal attacks against people. I won't do it. We won't do it in the next election, no matter what the Liberal Party or other candidates do. And that applies. Will apply here as much as anything anywhere else. We're going to respect the other candidates in the race, from the Liberal candidate to the Conservative candidate to Bob Simpson, to everyone running in the race. Because all of them, by running, are contributing to our democracy. That doesn't mean we won't say what we're going to do or why we're different or why our positions on all kinds of issues before us are different than the change we want to bring. But I think we owe it to ourselves for a better politics, and there's an important selfish reason why, beyond the lack of participation. I think the problems facing us today, many of the significant problems facing us today, from job creation to supporting communities, to ensuring that young people have the skills they need for the jobs of the future, or ensuring that the elderly, that seniors have every opportunity to live their lives in the fullest possible manner. That these problems today require a broader support and a broader mandate than ever before. That the very attacks and divisions of politics make it more difficult to solve the problems after elections. And I think that's an important challenge. We need, in other words, everybody to feel part of the solution, not just before the election, but after the election. And this requires a change of approach. So what are we going to do? What are we going to talk about? What are the issues facing this community and so many other communities? Well, surely the focus of this election, certainly the focus of the BC NDP, will be on the core economic issues. And our core economic issues, there are of course dozens of them to speak of individually, but they can be summarized by three key issues related to issues of employment. One, that our society and our economy isn't as productive as it used to be. We don't make enough things here. Our tendency is to export resources without processing them here, and that's a problem. So that, think of British Columbia, over the last 20 years, we used to be amongst the top Canadian provinces in terms of productivity, what we produce in our province, and now we're amongst the bottom. And Canada used to be amongst the top of all nations, and we're now amongst the bottom, and that's a problem for our economy. There's a lot of talk about the 1990s and the current decade, as if the provincial government is the sole factor determining economic growth and economic development in a globalized economy. But here is the fact of the matter. In the 1990s, when Dave Zernhout was a cabinet minister, average economic growth in BC was 3%. In the current decade, average economic growth is 2%. Under the NDP, 129,000 more people came to BC than left BC for other provinces, contrary to what you might see, oh, I don't know, in a Liberal attack ad. Under the Liberals, 59,000 people all came from BC. More people came to BC from other provinces and left BC to go to other provinces. Which, you know, is also a very good record. Half as good, but a very good record as well. So the facts, though, show that we are challenged in terms of the economy. We have to address these issues here. And we in the NDP are going to speak to those issues again and again in the election campaign, here, now. Second set of economic issues, and you see this between people, between communities, between regions, between neighborhoods, even within communities, is that we have more inequality today than we've had for decades. And think of British Columbia in this context. For all of the material wealth of the province, all of our forest resources, as Chauncey are, all of our oil and gas, all of our human resources, the fact that this is one of the most beautiful places on earth, you don't have to go very far in British Columbia to see the diversity of beauty of our province and of our population. Our openness to immigration has actually been a huge advantage, one that in the post-war era has changed the nature of our province, particularly in Metro Vancouver, but everywhere, for the better, not for the worse. These are real advantages, but think of this. All of those advantages, and we have the highest absolute rates of inequality of any province in Canada. Right? So think of that. The top 20% of income earners in British Columbia take home about 46% of the income after taxes. People tell me not to use so many numbers. That's what they take. Top 20%. That's after the progressive tax system has been brought into play. Okay? The bottom 20% of income earners, who represent, remember, 800,000 people, there are 4 million people in BC, take home 4%. And that ratio of the top 20% to the bottom 20% is the worst in British Columbia of any province. And we see that reflected, for example, also in high child poverty numbers. And that is a problem for our society and for the people involved, because it tends to mean that some people, at a time when young people need more education, need more support, have a more difficult time when they are not of means succeeding, as is true statistically, and we know in our hearts is true today. But it means as a society we're also losing what those people can bring to the table. And that's a big problem. And the third problem is one of sustainability. I don't need to tell anybody around here about that. I mean, we know the profound impact that the mountain pine beetle has meant to these communities. How there's timber supply areas in BC where the overwhelming majority of the trees are dead. And that the fact that this is linked to climate change is no surprise to anybody. Idea that the environment is some issue over here that we have to deal with separately, that it's kind of a hobby for good times and not linked to our economy, is obviously wrong. And we have to, as a society, address these problems, which are profound. Overseeing those problems, and we see that everywhere, is the challenge and the ongoing challenge of finding agreement and success in our relationships with our First Nations. So what do we do? What do we do as an economy today? We need to, I think, acknowledge that these are difficult times for governments as well. So we need to adopt, I think, certain principles. We can't solve every problem at once. This government, the current government, has run 4 consecutive deficit budgets. Well, they have a balanced budget law on the books. That's interesting. We have a situation in BC Hydro where we will be borrowing up to $5 billion in what are called deferral accounts that the Auditor General, yes, that Auditor General, says are the equivalent of borrowing money now to pay the government profit. That's what's happened at BC Hydro. And what that tells us is that we have to be prudent. When we promise, we've got to choose, we've got to make choices about what's important and what isn't important in terms of addressing the economy. I think in these times, for a provincial government with the powers of provincial jurisdiction, we have to ensure that young people have the skills they need for the jobs of the future. It is, I think, should be for a system as proud as ours, and a society as proud as ours of the value of education, a significant problem that there are new resource developments in our province where they cannot find workers in our province at a time of relatively high unemployment. That we say that every business I meet, from manufacturing to resource industry, the forest industry, the mining industry, says that we can't find enough skilled workers, and we are going to have almost an impossible time when the current generation of workers retire in replacing them. That at a time when you're addressing the question of inequality, when your ability to succeed in the economy is often based on your level of skills, your control over technology. As technology eliminates jobs, it's the people who have the education to control technology that succeeds, and we are making it harder and harder for young people to get access to that education. This has got to change. So we have proposed specifically this, that no young people should be denied access to education because they can't afford to go. It's not in the interests of our economy for this to happen. The time to pay for your education is when you have money, not when you don't have money. And when you are denying people access to the skills they need to support their families in the future because they don't have enough money now at 18 and 19 and 20, maybe because their parents don't have enough money now at 18 and 19 and 20. And this is particularly important in the interior, where young people often have to travel for post-secondary education. It is harder for them than it is for my constituents. in Metro Vancouver. And we have to see that change. So we have proposed specifically that we're going to reinstate non-refundable student grants to make sure people who go to the university, college, and trades and training are private. And we've also said, because these are difficult times, how we're going to pay for that by reinstating the minimum tax on the banks that the government eliminated in 2008. We have to do specific things to improve our apprenticeship system as well, so that young people can get access to the jobs of the future. After 10 years of Liberal government, our apprenticeship system currently has, get this, a 37% completion rate. Now, I know that there are different ways to judge success. If you get on base in baseball 37% of the time, you're a star. But if you have a public and private education system with a 37% completion rate, that is not success. The government was ideological of the way they approach skills training. Think of this. Union-backed apprenticeship programs had a 95% completion rate. And unions were essentially excluded from the ITA management when this government took power. That is putting ideology over common sense. We have to improve those things. We're going to have the people to take advantage of the jobs of the future. And I have to say that I think as well, we have the possibility, if we don't do that, of a generation of young people who will face long-term unemployment or have to move away. And that isn't acceptable here or anywhere else. We are not going to be an economy. We cannot be an economy in a successful society that depends on underpaying temporary foreign workers to succeed. We have to be a society that encourages immigration, permanent immigration, so people can come here and raise their families here and vote here and participate here. But the way we're going now is not the right path. We need more immigration, but we have to ensure that young people here get access to the jobs of the future. And that is going to be the focus in our first year, in our second year, in our third year, and in our fourth year. And of course, post-secondary education doesn't come in isolation from K-12 education. When I was growing up, I graduated from high school in British Columbia in 1982. And at that time, you could envision graduating from high school and getting a good job with a high school education you had. I think one of the problems we have today, and we've had since the government passed Bill 27 and 28 and broke its word to public education in our province in 2002. Just to put this in context, January 2002, current Premier was Deputy Premier, Minister of Education. The government had committed that they wouldn't tear up contracts, and then they did. They introduced those laws, both 27, 28, and 29 related to healthcare workers on a Friday in January, and they passed them by Sunday. All of those laws, in one form or another, have been found to be illegal in the courts. But that's the court question. What happened in the classroom is important. What happened here in Quesnel is important. What happened across the province is important. So the quality of public education was hurt, but the supports that students had were hurt, and a divisive approach was taken in education at the very time when we needed people working together. I think what we need in public education is a more respectful approach. That is not to demonize one another, but to come together around the solutions we need to see. I think it's been a particular problem, and we know this, in rural British Columbia, where the flexibility and options of smaller population bases and a declining enrollment have made it more difficult. And these are issues that we have to specifically address and will address in this election campaign. I think the second set of things I want to talk about is the source of our wealth and prosperity, which is the land. I think that the ideological approach the government has taken to issues hasn't been very practical. You think of all the period between 1871 and 2002. All of the forest ministers we had over that time, all of the wealth of the forest industry, which defined this community and many other communities, including Metro Vancouver, but every other community from the island to the north, everywhere. All through that time, when Dave Zernhelt was Minister of Forests, and when others were Minister of Forests, a forest minister could tell you what the inventory of forest resources was in the province. Now we're at a time when there is more need to know the truth about that than ever before. And the government cut the resources to provide us the information we need to make those decisions. That is a false economy. They reduced investment in reforestation. That is a false economy. They reduced regulatory supports for resource industries such that the time it takes to get a permit in the province has more than doubled in a 5-year time period, hurting economic development. In short, what we need are higher standards and faster decisions. That's what we need in our economy. And we need better information, not worse information. We need to reinvest in the land that will be of our value, will be of value to us long into the future. That's what a forest plan suggests. And we need to, because the government has been talking about raw log exports, which have drawn dramatically, and which are principally a coast issue, but are an issue throughout the province. The idea that our resources here would be sent out, even though there's domestic demand here. I was reading a book over Christmas about the previous Premier of British Columbia, Richard McBride, who was Premier in the first decade of the 20th century. The big debate at that time was the issue of raw log exports. And they passed a law then that I think had a lot of common sense. That you should only export raw logs if they're surplus to domestic demand. 90 times last year, in a 2-month period, the government overruled its own advisory committee. They appointed them on raw log exports and exported logs when there was domestic demand. If people want to know where we should stand on raw log exports, we should start by respecting the processes we set up. We should start by enforcing a law that's been in place for a very, very long time. And finally, it seems to me, we have to ensure that communities succeed. And we know this. It doesn't matter where you are in our province. We know this. There's a community, all of you know, I visited recently, Sycamoose, in the North Okanagan. They've been on a boil water advisory for 5 or 6 months. Their problem with that, and when you're talking about a town committed to attracting seniors and tourists, that is not a good problem to have. We have communities throughout our province with infrastructure challenges. And there are no answers to those questions. And they are essential to community life. Our job as government is not always to create jobs directly. It's almost never to create jobs directly. But it's to ensure that our towns are well furnished, are well prepared, are able to sustain economic development and be good places to live, that our healthcare facilities are of quality, that our schools are good. That's why people come to live in communities and to create wealth in communities and support their children in communities. And so what I've said is specific on this issue of sustainability. We created a carbon tax. You all pay it. We all pay the carbon tax that was brought in by the current government in 2008. There was an election fought on this issue in 2009. We had some problems with the carbon tax. The Liberals won, the carbon tax stayed. But here's what I know about that tax, that all of you pay. Not a penny of that tax. Not a centime of that tax. Not even a ruble of that tax. The Liberals love it when I say that. Goes to pay for any environmental initiative, any infrastructure in community, any transit, any issue that's focused on community. Every penny of that carbon tax went to defray other taxes. Most of them received by the wealthy and large businesses. So here's what we've said. We're going to roll back corporate income taxes to 2008 levels so we have some resources to invest in infrastructure in our province to address some of these questions, whether here or anywhere else. So those are some practical steps that we can take. I think it's fair to say that we can't do everything. But what I'm proposing to you and to our candidates, our excellent candidates who have stepped up to run for us in Cariboo North, our candidates around the province, is what I like to call the hard road to victory. Worthy of our times, I think. The easy road to victory is what our opponents are going to do. They're going to, I think, start to do it this week. They got a lot of money. They're going to hire ad agencies, and they're going to run negative ads. And we could do that too. There's one or two things one can criticize about the Premier and the current cabinet. But we're not going to do that. I think that this community deserves better than that. I think our province deserves better than that. So we need your help. The NDP has never won government in this province without winning seats here in the Cariboo. These seats are essential to us winning the next election. We have to win here to succeed across our province, to bring change to our province, to say to the Liberal Party that they, even though they act like they're a permanent government, they're not a permanent government. This is our government in British Columbia. We have to win here. We have to win where Bobby is. We have to win where Charlie is. We have to win in Cariboo North to bring that change. And these are crucial times for these communities. Anyone who understands the forest industry knows they need a government in Victoria that will stand up for communities in hard times, won't say to communities, tough luck in hard times. We need a government that will stand up for them, and we need MLAs who will stand up for the community, like we have running for the nomination here and like we have in neighboring Ryan. So to get there, we need your help. I need your help. We need to invite people back to the process that have stopped voting. We need you to talk in your workplaces, in your schools, in your community centers, to your families, to your friends. We need people on the door. We need people on the phone. We need people contacting people on Facebook and on Twitter. We need to engage with young people who are frustrated with the political process or see no place for themselves in it. It's the hard road to victory, but it's the only road to victory we've ever known. The NDP has had great leaders over the years. I mean really good leaders. We had Bob Strachan, first leader of the NDP, last leader of the CCF. Bob was a great leader. He, if many people will recall, proposed the nationalization of BC Electric. They laughed at Bob Strachan. And then he was winning the debate, so they nationalized BC Electric. He was a cabinet minister in the Barrett administration. He was the minister responsible for ICBC, the creation of ICBC. What a legacy, what a change in our province. Tom Berger was the next leader of the NDP, maybe our greatest progressive jurist, a voice for First Nations rights in our country, and modernized the NDP. Dave Barrett, what can you say about Dave Barrett? All of us who grew up, at least in my generation, growing up and going to school in the 70s and the 80s, Dave Barrett was the NDP. He's our Tommy Douglas. Think of what he achieved as Premier, so much of which is still around today, in a figure of great importance in our history. Mike Harcourt was leader of the NDP as Premier, and things like freedom from information, and a land use process that I think here in the Cariboo and others was visionary. A great Premier like Glenn Clark, who brought to us the Michigan Treaty and so many other things. Raised the minimum wage, reduced and brought young people back into the political process by giving them access to post-secondary education. We went from 9th in Canada to 2nd in Canada in post-secondary participation in that time because of the actions of the Harcourt and Clark government. Joy McPhail, who stayed on as leader in the toughest time and brought us back, and Carol James, who in the last 2 elections brought us to the edge of victory and brought us back. 42% of those 2 seats to 36 seats. So here's what all of those people have in common. They were all smarter and better speakers than I am. But this isn't a bad thing. I mean, if Dave Barrett was here today, you'd be here, and you'd probably be standing up and down, and the place would be rollicking and rocking. You can imagine if you had chip, papers flying up in the air, it'd be fantastic. And you go away and you say to yourself, no, that Dave Barrett guy's a genius. He's got it all in hand. When people hear me speak, they say one thing: that guy's going to need a lot of help. So I need your help, but it's not about me. But I also share in common with Dave Barrett and Mike Harcourt and Glenn Clark and Carol James. It's not about me. It shouldn't be about me. It's not about me or Premier Clark. It's about the voters and the people of this province. and the change we want to bring. Positive change, not just change. Change for the better, one practical step at a time. So I'm asking you in this campaign to get us a mandate for change that involves more people participating in voting. I ask you to do more in this campaign than ever before to elect a new government, a government for change, to elect a new MLA in Cariboo North who will be part of that government and bring change to the people of BC. Thank you very much. Thank you.
One more thing to do before we hear from the balloting committee, and I would like to ask.
It's a great big crowd from this vantage point. That's excellent. There were 28 eligible mail-in ballots and 50 cast in this room for a total of 78 ballots cast. There were no spoiled ballots. So 78 eligible ballots, required to win would be 40. And I'm happy to declare the NDP candidate and next MLA for Cariboo North to be Duncan Barnett.
This one is short. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you. I very much appreciate the confidence that you have placed in me, and I really hope that you'll be able to look back in a few years and say that I've earned it. I'm going to work hard for you. I expect you to call me and invite me to your groups or meetings and debates, and let's get some discussion happening, get people talking about these issues, get them engaged, and get them voting. You can see why when Adrian and I sat down to talk about running in this election, I was inspired. I like what he said. It really resonated with me. It fits with my values, my beliefs, and he said it so much better than I did, even though I've been practicing on my cows for the last 2 weeks. Well, a bit rusty, but we'll get going. I am really looking forward to working with Adrian and the NDP team, and I really think we are at a time when we can make some positive change. It is not going to be easy, and it's going to need everybody to get involved and help get the message out. We're going to have to campaign. It's going to be a tough three-way race. But you know what? It really is true. If you want to change government, you're going to have to vote NDP. And I hope that you'll be able to say we have a damn good candidate, and that's why we're voting NDP too. So, let's do it.
Thank you very much, Duncan, and thank you very much, Sushil. Thank you to all of you that came here. I will entertain some procedural or privilege motions if you have any.
Mr. Dix.
It's great to be here, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thanks. Back at the studio. I'm here with Adrian Dix, the leader of the NDP for the province of British Columbia. Pretty exciting day in Quesnel here.
It's a great day, just a huge turnout here today. We've got a great candidate, and I think Duncan and our team are going to do a great job. And so there's real enthusiasm here. I think people want to see a change in BC, but we don't want to. We don't want to win that change just because people don't like the premier, they don't like the government. We're offering positive change in a constructive campaign, and that's, I think, what Duncan's about, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, okay, so we should mention for the people, too, that Duncan Barnett won this. I think it was probably a close race. And, yeah, I'm understanding everything you're saying. One of the things that you touched on was the Cariboo being essential. And I think that's pretty interesting as well.
I think if you look at past BC elections, this is an essential area for the province for all the parties, but for the NDP in particular. I mean, we have never won an election without winning here. We have, I think, excellent candidates in North and South now, and Duncan Barnett and Charlie Wise. And this region is going to be critically important. And I think the election is going to be really important for the region because the decisions, what this region will need in the next few years is a government that's able to stand up for the region and MLAs that are going to be able to stand up for the region. And that's, it's an important time. The issues relating to forestry, relating to mining, relating to the environment, relating to healthcare and education, they're critical for the lives of communities here in the region. And so having these candidates, I think, is going to be really important. So it's not just important, obviously, because if we need to win Cariboo North to win a new government in BC to defeat the Liberal government, but also important for people here to be represented and to see their concerns represented at a crucial time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, a couple of things that you touched on that were, I think, quite important for the Cariboo, especially, is it was spoken a little bit here about raw logs, export, timber supply. These are huge issues here.
They're very significant issues. One of the problems we have now in BC, and one of the things that we're going to change, is the lack of an inventory. So everyone recalls when the Timber Supply Committee toured this region last summer. For all the period until the Liberals came to office, we knew we had an inventory of what the resources were so we could make good decisions. They got rid of that inventory effectively, and now at a very time when we need maximum information to make the right decisions for communities, we don't have that. We've also had a cut in investment in reforestation, which is really important for the long term because we want, and sometimes that's not just for now, but for our children and our grandchildren who will be able to succeed and live in communities because of the forest industry. So we need a commitment here, I think, to jobs, to the economy, to communities, and to the long term, which we haven't had. And I think it's a difference between ourselves and the current government, and we'll debate that. And but I think that's what makes this election so important. So important, in my view, for Cariboo North and Cariboo South to elect NDP MLAs.
Yeah. Another huge issue here is our school, our college.
Yes.
And there was something that you touched on here today that I'm not sure if everybody's aware of your stance, the stance of the NDP as far as loans and students and sustainability, really.
Well, I think we know. I mean, the government statistics show that 80% of the jobs of the future will require post-secondary education, and that in this community and many others, nowhere near that percentage of young people is getting that access. In fact, it's become harder to get access, not easier, to get access to post-secondary education. That's bad news for our economy. When we hear about resource projects where there's not enough skilled workers, that's one sign of it. But it's bad news for our people. If we are creating jobs, we should have people from communities in the north and in the interior able to get those jobs, and we don't have that now. We've got an apprenticeship system after 11 years of Liberal government that has a 37% completion rate. So we propose specific things that will ensure that young people have access to post-secondary education and support post-secondary education in communities. I don't think it's realistic, for example, for a lot of people to travel to Vancouver to get the skills they need and to travel back. We need to ensure that communities such as Quesnel, such as Williams Lake, such as Prince George, have access to those opportunities in the region. Because that's what we need to ensure that the region succeeds economically. Not just the individuals involved, but the whole region. And we haven't seen that for a number of years.
Okay. Maybe the last question. I know you're extremely busy today, and I thank you very much for your time. We're working on a multi-center here in Quesnel, as you're well aware, and the community's behind this. We're working really hard. I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, but what are your thoughts on that as far as infrastructure and sport and things in communities and how, how things like that can get pushed along in a city like Quesnel?
Well, we've heard that. I mean, those are decisions that eventually get made when you have those programs in place. But I think one of the problems we have in BC is we just, for example, introduced a carbon tax a few years ago. Not a penny of that carbon tax comes back to Quesnel in the form of anything. Environmental, community-oriented, infrastructure, water, all the things that communities need in the long run to be successful. And so what we've said is we're going to roll back the big business tax cut related to that to 2008 levels, so communities have some money to invest in their communities again, whether that is in the big city, sometimes that's transit, in Vancouver and other places. In other communities, it's water systems, which are many communities are having a problem with across British Columbia today. Here it might be community amenities. So those are the things we're looking at, and those will be decisions ultimately as well made by the communities themselves.
Excellent. Once again, I want to thank you very much for your time. Adrian Dix, the leader of the BC NDP party. Great day today. You've got a wonderful candidate here now. And
Look, we got a great candidate. We're looking forward to the election. I'm going to be back here again and again and again. It's going to be fun. I love Quesnel. Used to come up here when I was a kid. We had a friend of our family who had a place here in Quesnel. So he used to come up here in the summers. And I think my mom just wanted to get us out of the house, so she sent us up. So we'd come up here. We love Quesnel. It's just a wonderful place to live and to visit, and look forward to coming back again.
excellent. Thanks for being here. Good luck in the future.
Hey, thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
It's kind of exciting.
Okay. So let's just. So our levels are looking pretty good there. Okay, thank you. I'm with Duncan Barnett, and congratulations, Duncan. You've just been nominated the candidate for the NDP for Cariboo North. So this must, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this must be a pretty exciting day for you.
It is. It's a very exciting day, and it's going to be fun. That's what we're going to be about. Is we want to run a positive campaign for change, and we're going to have fun doing it, and we're going to get people engaged. We're going to win this election.
Okay, good for you. What's your next step? Where do you go from here?
Well, going to visit with a few people, be heading back down to the other end of the riding tonight, and then we get our campaign underway. We've got some organizing to do, a lot of volunteers, a lot of people that want to help and get the vote out, so that's the next step, is to get all that in gear.
Yeah, okay. I know you're going to have just a ton of things coming up here in the future. It's probably going to change your life a little bit, maybe take some time away from the farm.
It is going to change my life a bit. I'm expecting that somebody else is probably going to be looking after the cows for a while.
Okay.
That'll become a bit of a luxury for me. I'm going to be spending a lot of time in Quesnel. I do live down at the south end of the riding, and for people that have wondered about how this riding gets the shape it does, I figured it out. It's a watershed basis, because I live at the Horsefly end. Horsefly flows into the Quesnel Lake. Quesnel River flows into the Fraser at the city of Quesnel, just like the Blackwater does, so it actually all makes sense. Anyways, I will be here at the confluence of the rivers, campaigning quite often, I expect.
And just like politics, everything from here trickles down to Vancouver eventually.
Yes, and then it all gets down to Vancouver, yes.
Adrian Dix mentioned that the Cariboo North is essential to their campaign. He really feels that this is a very important area.
Well, he touched on it. If you look back at our record, the Cariboo has usually always had someone in government. And we've had some excellent MLAs in the past years, and I'm thinking of people like Alex Fraser and David Zernhilt, and people in the Cariboo are used to having their voices heard, their issues recognized, and that's because they contribute an awful lot to this province. The Cariboo is a wonderful part of the province, and I am damn proud to be nominated.
Excellent, excellent. I'll let you get back to celebrating. Once again, congratulations and the best of luck to you.
Thank you very much. Okay.